Hello friends, it's Saurabh here, back again at Progressive Coder. How is everyone doing out there? Today I bring for you a very special series of videos on React, and this video over here is the first video in an exhaustive React course that I have prepared. The overall course is divided into three major sections: beginner, intermediate and advanced. Depending on your level of requirement, you can proceed with the appropriate sections. And for ease of use, I have also combined the videos as well as published them individually by topics. So for example, in a React beginner course, you might have videos on what is JSX, what is React, and React components and React props and so on, individual videos. And then I also have a combined video that takes all of these individual videos and builds one common video out of that. The combined video is a bit more seamless in transitioning from topic to topic. So depending on your preference, you can choose to go through combined videos or go through individual videos. That's totally up to you. So without wasting any more time, let's start with the React beginner section of our course. And also, please don't forget to like and subscribe the channel. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people. So I won't waste any more time, enough talking. Let's start. Alright, so here we will start with the first section of our course, that is the beginner section for React. And the very first topic that we will have is an introduction to React. So what is React? If you go by the absolute official description of React, it is basically a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. This description is given by the very creators of React, that is Facebook, so it is as authentic as it can get. Since it is a library, then it is pretty safe to say that it is not a full-blown framework such as something like Angular. If you don't know about Angular, it is basically a framework to develop single-page applications. Angular is also one of the main competitors to React. Overall, React ecosystem comprises of many different libraries, and you can choose to use as much or as little as you want. Due to this flexibility, it is also said that React can be gradually adopted in your system or application. So moving on, how do we get started with React? And to do that, there are a few steps that have to be followed. The first is that we have to download Node.js on our system. Node.js is a JavaScript runtime environment that allows you to build applications using React. So we have to basically install Node.js and Node Package Manager as well. The next step is to install the package create React app from npm. Though there are several other ways to also start off with React, create React app is the easiest and by far the simplest way of getting started with React. Once the package is successfully installed, we can use create React app command to create a new React application and get started with developing it. So let's look at how things appear in our system. So first step is we have to check whether Node.js has been installed. So once you install Node.js, you can check your Node version like so. So currently I am running on Node version 12.14. We can also check the npm version using this command, and it is going to tell me the npm version or Node Package Manager version. So in my case, both Node.js and npm are installed properly. In case you want to install Node.js, you could head over to the nodejs.org site and download the latest version which is available. So in your case, it might be an even later version depending on when you are seeing this video. So you can download whatever is the latest version and then execute this command to find out whether Node.js is successfully installed or not. So the next step is to install create React app package. So how we can do that? We can execute the command npm install, and we want to do it at a global level. So npm install -g create React app. And what this will do is this will install the create React app package in our local system. As you can see, the package has now installed. Now using this package, we can create a new React application. So to do that, we can execute the command create React app my first React application, or I'll just keep it as app. So when we execute this command, this is going to build up a React application for us, and with all the best practices that are provided along with this package. This will take a while depending on the internet speed and your overall network connection. So the installation has finished and we get a bunch of messages over here, and if you scroll up you can see all that has happened. So the majority of this is downloading a bunch of dependencies that are required for running a React application. And when all of this has happened, you will see a lot of these messages, especially success message, and the first React application has been created. Now if you want to see what has been given to us, we can quickly run this application by using these commands. So we need to change into the directory. So we'll change the directory, my first React app, and then I'll execute the command npm start. So this is going to start our application. It tries to open it in Edge. I will close that and instead move to Google Chrome. So our application has started on localhost 3000. So I'll be giving that. And yes, we can see our React application has started up. So this is basically a template application that has been built along with the create React app package. So whenever we create an application using this particular package, we get a ready to use application with this particular homepage. And it also has a URL which takes you to the React official documentation. So with this, we have successfully managed to create a React application from scratch. And in the next video, we are going to open up this React application and see what we have got and what is the structure of this application look like. So till then, have a nice day. So what is JSX? JSX is basically the short form for JavaScript XML. So you could think of it as an extension to JavaScript. Basically, JSX is used to describe the UI in React. Let's look at an example to make it more clear. This here is a typical JSX. So you have a constant called element and it contains an HTML tag with a simple message hello world from React. This is a complete JSX in itself. The philosophy behind React is that the rendering logic, meaning the presentation logic or what you see on the screen, is tightly coupled with other UI logic such as handling events, preparing data for display, and so on. Therefore, React provides separation of concerns with loosely coupled units, also known as components. So you can imagine your document object model or your screen to be built using several components, like so. Imagine this is your screen and you can think of your screen in terms of various components. You could have a header component on the top. You could have a sidebar component like here, which takes care of all the sidebar related functionality. You could have a main content component and then followed by several list components within that depending on what you want to show. And again, this is a very simplistic model to demonstrate what components are. In a real application, you could have much more complexity added to this example. We will get into more details about components and JSX in the coming sections, but for the time being, consider this statement. JSX is nothing but the way of defining components in React. Let's now look at some code for our bootstrapped application. Basically, this is the application that was generated for us when we used create React app. So I've opened this application in Visual Code. You can use any other editor of your choice, whatever you prefer. First thing to note here is the overall folder structure. We have the node modules folder where all the dependencies, the npm dependencies are installed. Next, we have the public folder where all the assets that will be served as part of our client requests are located. Then we have the source folder where the source code will be located. And finally, we have the package.json file. Let's look at the package.json file. So this file talks about all the dependencies that are required for our React application. So as you can see in the dependencies section, we have used React, React DOM, and React scripts. Below here, we also have the script section where all the scripts related to running our application are located. We have the start script for running the application, build script for building it for production, and we also have a eject script for converting our React application that is created through create React app into a normal React application. We will look at that in a later video. The next important file located in our project is in the source directory, and that is the app.js. So app.js is the main file in our application right now, where all the HTML that we see on the home page is located. Let's run it now and compare. So we can execute npm start to start our application. I can open it in Google Chrome, and this is the application that we see over here. And if we go to our code, this is exactly matching with what we have in the app component. If you notice, this learn React button is coming from over here. We also have the statement edit src app.js and save to reload. So edit src app.js and save to reload. And if we do a change over here, we can simply write edited, and if we save it, an automatic compilation happens and the new version of our application is served by default. If you go back to the browser now, we can see the change has been reflected. We now have edited source app.js and save to reload. So this is how you can very quickly make changes and check your output in the browser at the same time. Now this app.component, even though it is returning a bunch of JSX, we have seen JSX a bit earlier, and this is a big amount of JSX written over here, but it is simply returning the JSX. How is it being rendered on the UI? That is still a mystery. So for that, we have to check the index.js file. Index.js is the first file that is loaded by the application when it starts up. And inside this application, we are rendering the app component. This app component is written over here. We just saw it. And it is being used in the index.js like so. And what React DOM render does is it will render the app component in the element called root. Now where is this element root defined? It is defined in the public folder within the index.html file. If we scroll down in the index.html file, we can see the root element over here marked for this particular division. So let's understand what is happening. When we start off the application and we make the request localhost 3000 from the browser, the index.html is the first file that is sent over by our server. And this index.html loads up, and it also loads the React application, and it will see that the root element is over here, and what it has to render in the root component is the app component over here. And this app component in turn is deriving its code from what we have written over here. So this is the overall bootstrap process for starting off a React application. Alright, so time to take a deep dive on JSX. So before we go further, I would like to clean up the application a bit more. So we have the source folder in our project. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all of these files. So app.css, app.test.js. I'll leave the index.css and index.js as it is. I will also keep the logo, and I can also delete the setup tests, and yeah, I think this should be enough for the time being, and I'll just delete them. And then what I'll do is I'll go to the app.js, and here also I'm going to simply clean up all the HTML like so. And since we have already deleted the app.css, we have to remove this import statement as well. We'll keep the logo over here. And with this, if we now try to compile our application, we are going to get some error. And as you can see here, the compilation error is showing up where it is saying us that parsing error is there, an unexpected token. So basically you cannot have a blank JSX being returned from a component. And that is why this error is showing up. So how do we fix this issue? Well, we can just put a JSX over here. So I'll just put a division, and I'll just put a message, hello world from React. And when I save it, yeah, I get some more warnings where it says that the logo is defined but never used. So we have this logo over here, but we're not using it actively. So I'll just comment it for the time being, like so. You can comment out by pressing /. And when I save it now, compilation has been successful. And if I go to my browser, I can see that the change has been reflected, and I can now see the hello world from React message showing up here. So this is the simplest example of JSX where you have only one HTML tag and then some message over here. And this is the smallest piece of JSX that you can return from your app component. Well, technically you could have a JSX even smaller where you don't even have a message over here like so. And even then it will be compiled successfully, but then nothing will show up on the screen as well, so it doesn't add any value to your application. We could also have something like expressions in JSX. So what does that mean? For example, we can go something like this. Before that, I'll just reduce the size of this, and I'll also close this so that you can see the code in a better way. So we could have something like this, const name Saurabh, and then within here we could say hello from, and we could embed the expression. So in this case, this expression evaluates to the value of name, and that will be printed on our screen. So let's see that. So if we save the app.js and if we go back to our browser, we can see hello from Saurabh. Expressions can basically be anything. So you could also have something like this, 2 plus 6, and this evaluates to an expression that is 8. So if we save this and we go to the browser, we'll see hello from 8. So basically at the time of rendering, 2 plus 6 was evaluated and the output was rendered on the screen. You could also have a function evaluated as part of this expression syntax. So we could have something like this. Say we have two variables, one is first name and the second one is last name. And then we could have a function format name, and what it does is basically it returns first name plus with a space last name. And then instead of this 2 plus 6, we basically call the format name function over here like so. And if we save this now, compilation has been successful and we can see hello from Saurabh Tashura being printed. So basically this function was called and then this function returned first name plus last name, and that was rendered on the screen. JSX itself is also an expression, so it can be part of if-else conditions, and based on that if-else condition we can render different pieces of JSX. Let's see that in action. So we could have a variable, let flag is equal to true, and then we have this format name function, but we could use something like this flag to determine what to render. So if flag is true, then we return our usual JSX, and else we can return something else. We could say hello from stranger. And if we compile this now and go to our UI, we can see the same message popping up. But if we change the flag value to false, and if we compile it now, and then if we go to our browser, we can see the new message, hello from a stranger. So this time, this flag value was evaluated, and since it was false, a different piece of JSX was rendered on the UI. So this is how you can work with JSX as expressions. JSX can also have attributes. So you can have attributes such as an image source or any other attribute such as a class. Let's see how that can be done. So I'll just clean up all of this code and we will uncomment our logo once more, and I'll remove this conditional also from over here. So we will just have this particular return statement, and instead of this hello world message we are going to have something else. So here also we will arrange it like this. So within this division we are going to put an image tag, and in the source we will have logo like so. So if we compile our code now, we can see that the logo has been rendered successfully. So basically here in our image tag, we are passing the source of the image as the logo, and this logo has been passed as an attribute within parentheses. And this is how you can utilize attributes along with JSX. If a tag is empty, we could also terminate that tag like this. So for example, we want to have an empty division, and usually we write it like this. But with JSX, we can simply terminate it like so. And this also basically does the same thing. As you can see, it was an empty tag, empty division. So nothing was rendered. And this is how we represented it. In JSX, you could also specify children's within a higher tag. So for example, we have a division, and within that division, we want to have an h1 tag saying hello message, and then maybe a paragraph, welcome to my first React application. And this is basically a combination of div tag and its children tags. So h1 and p over here are children to the division tag. So these are all the key aspects about JSX or JavaScript XML syntax. We covered all the aspects such as looking at a simple JSX. We also had attributes in a JSX, children within a JSX, and also we handled expressions, passing functions in a JSX. In the next video, we are going to look at React DOM update process and how frequently React updates its DOM to depict the UI changes. So stay tuned for that. Alright, and welcome back. So the great feature about React is that it updates the DOM or the document object model only when it is necessary. And when is it necessary? Of course, when there has been a change to the document object model. Also, another cool thing about React is that React only updates what is necessary. So what does that mean? It means that React DOM compares the element and its children to previous ones and only applies the DOM updates that are necessary to reach the new desired state. Does that sound confusing? Let's see that in action. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to this time work on the index.js file. So what I'll do is I'll create a function named function tick. And in this function, what we are going to do is we are going to declare an element like so. We'll have a division and some h1 tag, and I'll name it hello clock, and then I will put up a message. It is new date to local time string. So basically we are trying to display the time over here in our home page. So this is our division, and next what I'll do is I'll copy this React DOM render function and I'll place it over here. And instead of this particular app component, I'll be rendering the element component. And finally, we have to call this function tick. So this function tick, I'm going to call every second. So I'll pass, in the set interval function, I'll pass the callback function as tick, and I'll set it up to execute after every 1 second or 1000 milliseconds. So if I save it now, if I come back to the browser, I should see that our timer is working fine. So we are able to see the seconds being updated. So let's go ahead and inspect this. And if I open the view and if I drag it here, you could see this blink happening over here. And if I expand it further, I should be able to see what's happening down here. And if you notice over here, after each second when the tick function is being called, it is updating the timer. However, as you can notice, rest of the HTML tags are as it is. So no change over there. So React basically is not rendering what has already been rendered and has not been changed. It is only changing what is necessary. And that is, in this case, the new time. And this is a great part about React, due to which its performance is so high when you're trying to render a lot of content on the screen. React only renders what is necessary. And this is something that you should keep in mind going forward as you work on React. So that was all about the React DOM update process. In the next video, we are going to look at components in React. We'll be covering class components as well as functional components, so stay tuned for that. Alrighty, so one of the most important topics with regards to React. So React components are one of the most important aspects of a React application. They are basically the building blocks for your React application. When you build applications in React, you should always think in terms of components. The idea is to think about your application as a combination of components that may or may not be related to each other. Using components, you can split the user interface into reusable and independent pieces. Lastly, components can also be thought of as functions that return React elements. Moving to this diagram that we saw earlier, our entire user interface can be divided into components. Each component plays a specialized role in this case. For example, the header component takes care of the application header functionality. The sidebar component takes care of the sidebar functionality. Each component can also be further subdivided into one or more smaller components depending on the needs of your application. Moving on, there are two different types of components which you can have in React. The first of them is the class components, which I would say are the more common type of components that are used throughout the industry. And the second one is functional components, which started more as a secondary afterthought, but over time it has also grown in popularity. We will be looking at both of these type of components in great detail along with examples. Alright, so time to look at some code now. So we have our demo application over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first create a class component. And to do that, I'm going to click on this Explorer tab over here and open the folder view. And within the source directory as well, I will be creating another file. And I will name it my first class component. react.js. Now the first thing that you have to do while creating a new component is to import React. So we will be doing import React from React, like so. And then we will be writing our class definition. So class, my first, let me just close this one down so that it looks more clear. So class, my first class component, and this is going to extend React component, like so. And then inside the class component or the class definition, we need to have one method, and that is the render method. This render method is going to return some amount of JSX. So we have return, like so. And for timing, we can just have a division, and inside that division I'll just put up a message, hello from my first class component, like so. So important point to note here is that this render method is mandatory in a class component. So if you have a class component, you need to have at least one render method. And now we are seeing a little bit of a warning. So that means the reason for that is that we have never used this function. So what we have to do is we have to export this from our file. So export default my first class component. And due to this statement, now we can use this component in other files. So let's see how we do that. So I'll just save this one, and then I'll go to app.js. And inside app.js, I'm going to remove this paragraph tag, and instead we are going to replace it with our new class component. So I'll remove it, and I will be putting the class component over here, like so. So when I start typing, there is a suggestion provided by the editor, and this is my first class component, and I'll just press it. And so two things happened here. So as soon as I pressed enter on that suggestion, this import statement came here automatically. So what it says is import my first class component from my first class component file. And the reason this happened was because of this export statement. If we had not exported this class from the my first class component.js file, we couldn't have imported it over here. So that is why that export statement is very important. So once we have done that, we can now save the app.js file as well. And now I'm going to do npm start. And this is going to start my application. So if I go to Chrome now, I can see the hello message coming from the class component, hello from my first class component. And this is exactly in line with what we have put up over here. So this is an example of a class component. In the next section, we are going to look at the same thing in a functional component. So let's look at a functional component now. So we'll leave this class component as it is. I will just close this window, and I'm going to go back to the folder structure, and I'm going to create another file, and I'll name it my first functional component.js. Again here, like the class component, we will be first importing React. So this React package is mandatory if you want to use React in your files. And next what we'll be doing is writing the functional component. So the name will be function my first functional component, and inside this functional component I just need to have a return statement. So return div and hello from functional component, or I'll just elaborate it a bit more, hello from my first functional component. And again there's a little warning. To remove that, we have to again export this function from the file, like so. accidentally put it as class component. So export default my functional component. So we remove the export statement. So this is basically a functional component, and as you can notice, the important point over here is that there is no render method over here. So if you compare this with your class components, let's open that side by side. So if you see the class component, you have a render method, and within that render method you have the return statement. Whereas in a functional component, you directly just have a return statement. So basically functional components are essentially JavaScript functions that return some JSX. Now before the arrival of something known as React hooks, functional components were also known as stateless components. If you don't know much about state, don't worry, we will be covering that in the future videos. And if you also don't know much about React hooks, also don't worry, we will be covering those in great detail in future videos. So with this examples, we can basically see the difference between class components and functional components. Let's render it now. So to use this functional component, we can again go back to our app.js, and just below the class component, we could put our functional component, my first functional component, like so. And if I save it now, our application is going to refresh. And if I go back to the browser, I can see the message coming from the functional component. So basically our app component, which by the way is a functional component itself, is using one class component and one functional component, and that is perfectly fine. In your application, you will typically be using a mixture of class components and functional components depending on your need. And you will always be mixing and matching these things. So basically with this, we have seen the difference between class components and functional components. In the next video, we will be looking at props and how props can be used in class and functional components. So until then, stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Progressive Coder. So how is everyone doing out there? Today we are going to look at a very interesting topic known as React props. So what are props? Props are basically just JavaScript object, and they are used to pass data from parent component to the child component. So if you can consider components as functions, props can be thought of as arguments to those functions. Just like with arguments, the values in the props object can be accessed in the child component or the child function. However, there is one major difference between props and normal arguments. That difference is that props are immutable. In other words, props are read-only. Components can access its props but not modify them. So basically the rule is that all React components must act like pure functions with regards to their props. Let's look at props in our class component and functional component examples. So let's switch over to our demo application, and this time we are going to first look at props in functional components because that is going to look more easy and more intuitive. So to do that, we'll visit our functional component.js file over here, and we are going to use a simple props over here right now. So to use props, we have to first include props argument in the function definition. And my plan is that this message that we are showing over here, instead of putting this message over here, I want this message to be sent by the parent component. So to do that, I will assume that this props object is going to have an attribute known as message, and I can use that attribute like so. So I'll replace this, and instead of the entire message, I'll simply write props.message, and I'll just save this one. So right now, if I go to the browser, I can see that the functional component message has vanished. This is because the props.message is not having any value right now. And to fix that, what we can do is we can go back to the app.js where we are calling this function, and instead of passing it as a blank functional component, we can pass the message property. So let's do that. So I'll declare a variable const functional message, and maybe the variable name is not that great, but it will suit our example. And I'll just put the message over here. Welcome to my first functional component, like so. And this functional message I'll be passing that over here. So remember, we are trying to use props.msg in our functional component, and hence that is exactly what we should write over here when we assign this variable. So if I save things now and go back to the browser, I can see that the functional component message is being rendered successfully. So we are seeing welcome to my first functional component, but this time the message is coming from the parent component or the app component rather than being in the functional component itself. So this is the first and the most easiest way of using props in functional components. We could also make things a little neater over here by using what is known as object destructuring. So to do that, I can simply remove props and just write message. And this is basically signifying that I want to extract the message attribute from the props object. And then here, instead of writing the entire props.message, I can simply write it like this. And if I save things now and go back to the browser, same result. Lastly, there is another approach to represent functional components, and we have not discussed that till now, and that is by using arrow functions. So how do we do that? Let's look at that. So here, instead of this function statement, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable, my first functional component, and I'll be using arrow function over here. And inside the arrow function, I'm going to return this particular division. And then basically I can remove this particular function from over here. So now if you see, there is a error over here that MSG is not defined. So we can pull out props using object destructuring, like so. And if I save things now and go back to the browser, same result. Welcome to my first functional component. So as you can see, this is also another alternative way of writing functional components, and that is using arrow functions. Arrow functions were introduced as part of ES6, and they can make your code look even more neater. And there is one final touch you can also put over here. Since there is only one statement over here, that is return division, we actually don't need to write a return also. So what we can do is we can simply copy this part, and I can remove the rest of this stuff and just put this over here like this. And if I save things, same result. So this is a very, very neat way or handy way of finishing your code in case there is only one statement that you have to return. In case there were multiple statements or multiple pieces of HTML tags, then it is advisable, or it is the correct way to go for a return statement and then put it in proper parentheses so that things are more clear. But if there is only one small piece of JSX that you want to return, you can also put it like this. So let's now move over to using props in our class component. So I'll close this functional component file, and I will go to the class component file over here. And as we can see, we have a render method over here, and we don't have anything else. We have this message. So to use props in class component, we can directly pull out the this.props object. Let me show you how. So we'll extract the message, again using object destructuring, like so. So this.props is something we assume will be passed to our class component, and we'll pull out the message property and put it in a variable known as MSG, and then I can simply remove this piece of JSX and I can simply write MSG over here, or message. And you know the drill now. So right now if we save things, the message vanished because this is not having any value. So to pass the message, you have to go to again app.js, and here we can have another constant. We can have another constant saying class message, and I'll simply copy the same message, and instead of functional, I'm going to write class. And here I can pass message as class message. And if I save things now and go to the browser, I can see that the message was rendered successfully. So in this case, this message was passed to the class component, and then in our class component, we extracted this message directly from the props object into a message variable or constant, and then we placed it again into the JSX wherever we wanted. So this is how you use props in class components. So the last small thing that I wanted to show you is the point about immutability of the props object. Let's see that in action. So imagine a scenario where I am receiving these props and I want to modify them for some reason. So I know that there is a message attribute over here and I want to change the message. So what I can do is I will try to go over here and set this .props.message is equal to changed message. And I'm going to save things and I'll go to the browser. And as soon as I go to the browser, the things render and you can see that I received a big error over here. And the first line itself explains the error. So it's a type error, cannot assign to read-only property message of object. And that object is basically the props object and message is again a property of that object. So basically what React is trying to tell us that you cannot change the read-only property. So this means that the props object is in fact immutable. And so this is invalid statement over here. So if I remove this and if I save things, it again starts working fine. So this means that you can receive the props object, but you cannot modify that in a component. And this creates an issue if we want to make our components more dynamic. To solve that, we will be looking at something known as state in future videos. So with this, we have successfully completed our React beginner section. We covered a lot of important topics in this section. We looked at what is React and how a React app starts up. We also took a deep dive into JSX or the React's way of describing the user interface. We also understood the React DOM update process and how React only renders the changes and thereby making things faster. Finally, we looked into React components, both functional and class components, and how we can use props with both of them. If your goal was to simply have a high-level understanding of React, this is enough. However, if you intend to get into serious React development in the coming days, you should definitely continue to the intermediate section, where we'll be covering a lot of important topics related to React. Hope this section was useful to you, and definitely I would look forward to see you in the next part of the course. Don't forget to like and subscribe.